Hey kids, it's Papa. You ready to explore the Bible? All right. Now today we're going to remember when we did the live episode a while back. I explained to you those 400 silent years. Well, today we're going to talk about them in a little bit more detail because it's important that you understand that time frame because a lot of things happened during that time. Now, you remember that Babylon had come in and wiped out Israel and everything had taken them away, and then when the Medes and the Persians conquered Babylon, they kind of the king went and said everybody can go back to the land, and so then they were in charge. But then there was another group that came through. It was Alexander the Great. We talked about him briefly. When he died, he left his entire realm to I think three, maybe four generals. Now, down in Egypt were the Ptolemies. Okay, the most famous of the Ptolemies is Cleopatra. And then there was the Seleucids. Now, the Seleucids reigned up in Syria and Judea and all of the area around where Israel was. And there was constant wars between the Ptolemies and the Seleucids, and Israel was kind of stuck in the middle of that. And Israel not only was stuck in the middle, but then there were times when they kind of played both ends against the middle. Okay, and so they kind of used it as well. But the Seleucids basically took control. Now, keep in mind, these were Greek people. And you're going to find that as you study history, you're going to talk about Hellenization. Hellenization is basically the idea of the Greeks uh, imposing their culture on other people. Now, in Israel, there was a lot of this going on. There were people who wanted to become more Greek, and they would take on Greek names, and they would take on Greek religions, and they would take on Greek philosophy. This was called Hellenization. And this was the group that the Sadducees came from. Okay, they were sad, you see, because they didn't believe in the resurrection. They were thought themselves very intellectual and they weren't going to bow down to this religion thing. And so there was this Hellenization that was taking over. Now that created some problems in Israel because around about 167 BC, now you're going to want to remember that, 167 BC, there was a priest up in Galilee by the name of Mattathias and or Matthew, but Mattathias, and he'd had enough of all of this Hellenization of and so he basically started a little bit of a rebellion. Now, right about that same time, the Seleucid king there noticed that there was some fighting going on over who was going to be the high priest in the temple. Okay, and there was this fighting going on, and he mistook that for being a rebellion against him. Okay, he made that mistake, and so he came in with an army and you know kind of pushed people around, and then he did something that really started problems. He took some pigs. Now remember, pigs were unclean, and he went and he sacrificed them on the altar in the temple. Arrgh! And all the Jews were, oh, and so what did they do? That here Mattathias started this rebellion, and he came against the he came against the Seleucids. Now, to keep in mind, he didn't have really a big army. All he really had was a bunch of soldiers, and they weren't well trained and they weren't well equipped. So what he ended up doing was what we refer to as guerrilla warfare. Okay, do you understand what guerrilla warfare is? Um, he would go and he would come at night, and he would conquer, he would attack a garrison and kill a bunch of them, and then he would run away. And then he would go and he would steal a whole bunch of their arms, and then he would go away. And he would go and steal a whole bunch of their food, and then he would go away. And so he would make war with these little attacks when they weren't looking. And all of these victories started getting him some fame, and they started calling him the Hammer. And, and the problem is, about 3 years into this, he died. He was killed in a battle. And his son, now he had, I think, 5 sons, and his son stepped up. His son's name was Jude or Judas or Judah. And he took on that mantle of Maccabeus. That meant the hammer. And he was probably the most famous of the Maccabeans, and he continued it, but he went a little bit farther than just guerrilla warfare. He actually raised an army and went in and conquered Jerusalem and took it away from the Seleucids. But now the problem is, you've got a city that you have to defend. Okay, yeah, you've taken some property, but now you've got to defend it. So it really changed the type of warfare. And he realized, ooh, I'd better start doing some political wranglings. Now, there was all kinds of people around there that could offer him some aid and some armies and some money and that type of thing. And so they started playing those political games. And then he got killed, and his brother got killed, actually got crushed by an elephant. And anyway, so the Maccabean period was them, the sons, and eventually they all got killed in battles. But then they handed it off down to their kids, and so that is the that period of time is takes us right up to about 40 BC. So in other words, about 130 years approximately, they and their descendants were in control, and they were playing political games. A lot of it started off with rebellion and warfare, but then it kind of degraded into playing politics. And during that time, Rome came in. I think Rome came in like 63 BC and conquered Jerusalem, and they kind of skirted things and then came out of hiding and said, hey, we're so glad you're here, and maintained control by doing that. And that came right up to the Hasmonean period, when Herod the Great took over. And we're going to talk about him next time. But what you need to understand is that the Maccabean period ran from about 167 BC to 40 BC. And it covered the Matthias and Mattathias and his son Judas and all of his brothers, and then all of their descendants. And that was known as the Maccabean period. And so anyway, just keep that in mind. There was a lot going on there. As all of the elements of all of the countries around, because Egypt played a role, and Rome played a role, and the Seleucids with all the Greek influence. It was a fascinating time. There was a lot going on. So when we refer to this time as the 400 silent years, that doesn't mean that everyone was just sitting there going, we're being silent. No, there was a lot going on. But God was not speaking during that time through the prophets. And so because of that, we call it the 400 silent years. Anyway, hey, love you guys. We will talk to you probably about the Herodians next. I love you. Bye.